You don't have a blank problem. You have a wisdom problem. Today, I'm going to try and convince you that you only have one problem, and that problem is you don't have enough wisdom. Now, I heard this a while ago in a audio, and it struck me because I came to the conclusion back then that everyone really just has wisdom problems. And it was one of those things, it kind of spoke to me, but I didn't really have any rational reason to believe it or rational reason to, tell someone else that, this is the truth. But recently, I've been reading the book How to Think Like Socrates by uh, Donald Robinson. And Socrates confronts this in this book, and it basically filled in all the blanks that I didn't know how to articulate, but I already agreed with. So Socrates is having a dialogue with, I think his name's Protagoras, and he's one of the he's he claims to be a teacher of wisdom, and he claims he's like a sophist, which is like a intellect back in the day of Athens, and he's having this dialogue with Socrates because this is after Socrates got back from the oracle at Delphi, and he was trying to find someone wiser than him because if you don't know, the Delphi, the oracle, told um, told Socrates that he was the wisest man. So he said this can't be true, and what I'm going to do about it is find someone who's wiser than me, and then go back to the oracle and show her that she was wrong, and that there actually is someone wiser than me. So Socrates goes on this big mission trying to find someone wiser than him. And this is the first person he kind of questions because everyone says this guy is the wisest. So Socrates goes in the dialogue with him. And I'm not going to go over the whole dialogue, but it comes to a point where Socrates is asking him, about courage and about um, mostly about courage, talking about people who act with courage and stuff, and people who act with cowardice. And he asked the guy, he's like, because Socrates went about asking people, he asked questions. He was like a question and answer kind of guy to get people to elaborate on their views. And most of the time, they would realize that they really had no rational reason for having the views that they had, and they were actually completely wrong about them. But in this instance, Socrates asks him, does anybody do what they know is bad for them? And the guy says no, which I agree with. I don't think anyone knowingly does what is bad for them. And then Socrates says, well, then the coward who doesn't go to war doesn't have a courage problem. He's not courageous enough. He's just not wise enough. Because he would, if he knew that this was the better course of action, he would do it because you just clarified that everyone does what they believe to be best. And then he has to agree. And this all stemmed from an argument about courage with Pythagoras, but this doesn't really have much to do with the point I'm trying to make, which is that you don't have a courage problem, or you don't have a problem with being a coward. You don't have a problem with, temperance or self-control or justice. You have a wisdom problem because everyone does what is in their best interest. That's the one thing that all humans have in common. We all are doing things with our best interest. And there is acts of selflessness, but I believe behind most acts of selflessness there is a element of selfishness. You feel good about yourself when you're selfless. So there is an element, then you're going to feel good about yourself. So there's an element of selfishness. But Socrates makes the point, these people, they do not have a courage problem. They have a wisdom problem. And I think that just translates everywhere in life. And then, as you're thinking, because this is exactly what I was thinking as I was reading this, it's like, well, I do things that I know I shouldn't do. Why is that so? You tell yourself, I'm going to stick to my diet this time. Never again am I going to partake in this pleasure. Never again am I going to do this because I know how it makes me feel after. I know it's not worth it. Yada, yada, yada. And then you tell yourself, never again. And then the next day, you find yourself cheating on your diet, not going to the gym, giving into that pleasure you said you wouldn't give into again, breaking the oath you made. And then you're in the same spot. You're telling yourself, never again, yada, yada, yada. And then the next day you do it again. So why does that happen? If we know what is best for us and we know what we need to do, then why is it that we don't do it? If everyone does what they know, if everyone does what they know is best for them. And the answer to that question, Socrates says, is more or less we're blinded. We're blinded by pleasure. Because in the moment, you don't want to endure the pain, the small pain, to miss out on a larger pain. But when we're in these mind frames, we're so closed-minded to the present moment. You need to be wise enough to look to the future and wise enough to really, really evaluate how this is going to play out on a long time scale. And that's a wisdom problem. It's not a temperance problem. Because if say, if you could look at your life, like imagine I think it's Christmas Carol with Scrooge. When he saw how people reacted to his death, he changed his ways. If you were able to see how you would feel about the thing you're about to do 10, 15, 20 years from now, and it was negative, you wouldn't do it. But we lack that wisdom to look that far ahead sometimes, especially in the moment when we're so focused on the present and we think, I can't endure this anymore. I have to give in to this pleasure. I can't. My willpower is giving out. You don't need more willpower. You need more wisdom. You need more understanding that this is what is best for you and that it is rationally and logically what is best for you. But you have to look into it rationally and logically. So often people do and speak without thinking. There's a line from Leonardo da Vinci, and he says more or less, people speak without thinking. They touch without feeling. They smell without the awareness of aromas and fragrances. They see without looking. Basically saying that we have all these senses that we never use. Or, we use them, but we're not aware of them. We're not aware in the present moment of what we are doing. Just take a deep breath in. And you'll probably smell some smells that you were a second ago blind to. And, listen. You'll probably hear some things that you didn't hear a second ago because you weren't aware. You weren't looking into it. If you touch, you can feel, like in this table, you can feel the little indents in the wood or whatever the material this is. You can feel that stuff. And my nail can even catch it. That's something I've never noticed before. And I sit at this table every day. Granted, only for like 2 months now, but still, something I haven't noticed in 2 months. And then you look around, so much stuff you could just see for the first time, for actually looking with intention and awareness. Leonardo da Vinci said this, 500 years ago. And it's so true. And what brought that point up in the thinking, we say things and do things without thinking. And that's how and why we degrade ourselves. That's how and why we give into so many pleasures and do so many things that we don't want to do. And that's a wisdom problem. You need the wisdom to realize that you need to think before you act. You need the wisdom to realize that you need to have foresight into the future. You can't dwell and live in the future. You need to live in the present, but you need to have foresight into the future and think, how is this going to work out for me on a long timetable? I forget. There's a quote I like, and maybe it's not even a quote. I know, maybe it isn't even a quote. Maybe I just came up with this, but it's related to something else. But it's like, you need to live today like it's your last, but at the same time, like you're immortal. You need to live today like, it could potentially be your last day. This could be the last day you ever live. You could die today. But you also need to live today as if your actions you'll have to live with for eternity. What you do, you will never be able to undo, and you'll have to live with it the rest of eternity, not even your life, because you're immortal. So you need to live today, paradoxically, like it's your last day ever, and just a day in an infinite number of days. But, as I say, philosophy is so often paradoxical. And to live a good life, I think you need to live life as if it is your last day, and just a day in the life of a immortal. But that's just some examples with giving into pleasure, because that's the first thing that comes to my mind, because it's like, so often, you see it with kids and you see it with ourselves. We do things that we know we shouldn't do. You tell a kid not to do something, and what does he do? He does it. And you might think, well, right there, that's a plain example. But it's not so easy as that. The kid truly doesn't know he shouldn't do that. He's seeing why he shouldn't do that. He's inquiring, because kids are curious. And I mean, thankfully they are. So many religions and so many wise people say you need to be childlike, because Leonardo da Vinci is also one of them, who says you need to regain the awe you had as a kid. The Bible says you will not inherit the kingdom of heaven unless you become childlike. And you just need your sense of childlike awe. Question things, ask why. Kids are always asking why. They don't just say, someone just doesn't tell them, this is the way things are, and they say, they're not dogmatic. They say why. And then, if you're there unfortunate, their parents just say because, and then they have to deal with that. Or, the kid is almost acting like Socrates to the parent and saying, why? And then the parent has to think, why is it like that? And then hopefully the parents has a good answer, or they'll say, I'll get back to you on that. I don't think just because is ever a good answer to give to a kid. That destroys the questioning nature in a kid. But like I said, that's just the example that first comes to my mind. But it's in so many areas of life. You don't have a money problem. You have a wisdom problem. You don't have a time problem. You have a wisdom problem. Everyone has 24 hours in a day. Why is it that some people get so much out of 24 hours and other people get so little out of 24 hours? Because of wisdom. Why is it that people who make more than other people are in more debt, live paycheck to paycheck, so on and so forth? They make more money than them. They live in the same world. Say they even live in the same city, the prices are the exact same. They have the same option of the type of house, the type of food, so on and so forth. Why is it that the people who make more money have less money than the people who make less money? It's a wisdom problem. Because everyone wants to do what is best for them. So many people that I know regard time as, they're not willingly deprived of the truth, but it seems like they regard time as futile. It seems like they regard time as meaningless. They work every second of overtime they can get. All they want to do is work at something they don't really like that much, to have a $500 car payment, to have, a boat, to have an ATV, a dirt bike, 2 vehicles. And then when you or me doesn't want to work overtime because I regard time as the most valuable resource, they look at you like you're crazy. But they work to spend their money, and I work to save my money because I don't want to work anymore doing stuff I don't want to do. So the more I save, the more opportunity I have to actually pursue a passion and take a risk to go for a passion. But they just work to have more money, to spend more money. So often you see that, and that's a wisdom problem. It's not a money problem because, like I said earlier, there's people who make less money who have more money than people who make more money. How does that work? Because they spend more money. Because they want more. The truly rich person wants less. You should need little. So little is needed to live a good life, Marcus Aurelius will tell us. So little is needed. And I'm not saying, working is horrible. It's good to work hard at your dreams. But when you're working just for money, just so you can spend it on cheap pleasures and things you don't really need, it's a waste of time. And you spend it on things that just make you go into debt. So you have to work more, and you have to keep up this unrealistic work hours, or you're going to start losing money because all your bills are too much. You get a car payment, you get 2 car payments, say. You got, your toys, your boat, your ATV, your dirt bike, and then you got, your rent or your mortgage. And it's like, wow, I need to work 40 hours of overtime every 2 weeks, or I'm going to be spending more money than I'm making every month. So therefore, every spare second they have, they try to work overtime. And they don't even have time to use their boat, all these other toys they bought. It's sad because it's a wisdom problem. Because nobody, I believe, is willingly deprived of the truth. And even someone can hear this who does all these things, and they still wouldn't gain the wisdom to not partake in it. You need to truly change yourself. It's like you can show smokers how bad smoking cigarettes is for them. But like I said earlier, if they're so focused, tunnel vision on the present, and they can't see how their actions are going to affect themselves in blank number of years, then they'll give in to the little pleasure instead of prolonging it and getting the real deep pleasure. That's what the wise man obtains. Deep, long-lasting, real pleasure. Paradoxically, you get the most pleasure from self-control. The person who doesn't indulge has the most pleasure. And they get the most pleasure from the smallest things. A person who, eats so much food every day, they don't even regard food as, anything other than just, something to keep their dopamine up and something to keep their pleasure up, or they're going to feel like they're in a pit of loneliness and hell because they're not getting this pleasure that they're so used to. Then you get a person who's ate with moderation and temperance for months, weeks, years, and you let them have some sweets or a cheat day or whatever, and they could get deep pleasure, and they can still have the temperance to stop themselves. Because one thing the Epicureans say, which is valuable, because the Epicureans, if you don't know, are like the opposite of the Stoics. They believe the goal of life is pleasure, where the Stoics believe the goal of life is virtue. But the Epicureans were wise enough to admit that a pleasure that you enjoy in the moment, but regret later on, is not a real pleasure. You need to take into account the whole experience. So, an easy example is, drinking alcohol. You might have a really good Friday night, but if Saturday is horrible because of your Friday night, that's part of the drinking experience. You can't gate them off. You can't say, well, this was my drinking experience and this was just some random occurrence that has no correlation. It's like, no, they're one thing. And the Epicureans actually were somewhat wise. I disagree with pleasure as a goal of life, but they go about it in a temperance way. They say pleasure is the ultimate goal, but only in temperance. So it's like, they're kind of nitpicking, if you ask me, because they're like, they're so much different than people nowadays per se with pleasure. It's like they're aware that, yes, pleasure is okay in moderation. And I think the Stoics would agree. But the Stoics would say you can't sacrifice wisdom or virtue, where the Epicureans would say it doesn't matter. Pleasure is over wisdom and virtue. At least that's my take. I'm not well versed in Epicureanism, so if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Don't take my word. But from my understanding, that's more or less the Epicureans' view. Pleasure is the ultimate good, so therefore it must be better than virtue and wisdom, which I disagree with. But they were wise enough, like I said, I'm going around in circles right now, but they were wise enough to know that it's the whole scope of the experience. And that's why it's wise, because if you understand, if I like eating healthy so I can stay in shape, because I was out of shape before, and I understand how much that sucked. And now, maybe I can't eat whatever I want, but I feel better, which is a win, and I feel better about myself, which is a win, and I'm healthier. I'm going to live longer, which is another win. And that's all, I see it. I know the truth now. I can't deny it. I've lived this life and I've lived this life. And I know the wise life and the better life is over here. So therefore, I have to. I've seen the truth. I've gained the wisdom. That's why I believe it's so easy for me to go to the gym and to work out and to eat healthy, because I've lived both lives, and I know how much one sucks and how much one is amazing. And why would I want to live a sucky life? Everyone wants to do what's best for them, and that's all I'm doing. That's all anybody does. But the difference between me and someone who never got out of not going to the gym and eating unhealthy is that they don't know the bright side. When I first started working out, I didn't like it, but you learn to love it. You need to act with discipline for a certain amount of time before it becomes a habit. And then you gain the true wisdom of realizing that this temperance, self-controlled discipline is such a deeper pleasure than that cheap, self-indulgent pleasure that leaves so soon, so fleeting. And as soon as it leaves, another pleasure sparks up, and you're just a pleasure-seeking machine. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You don't have a blank problem. You have a wisdom problem. That's why wisdom is the most important thing I believe you can get. And I made a video talking about how I believe, if I had one wish, I said I'd want wisdom. And then someone said, that'd be boring because you know what to do all the time and you'd always do the right thing. And then I said, well, knowing to do the right thing and actually doing it are two different things. They agreed, and I felt good about myself because I had a good comeback and I felt like it was a sound answer. But now I realize I was wrong. And I made a video about this recently, and I just realized I was wrong, like 2 seconds ago. Because true wisdom, because everyone does what's best for themselves. If you had true wisdom, you know it was best for yourself. So therefore, you'd have no choice. You'd always have to act wisely because you'd know. Because you'd know. You'd know what is best for you. You'd be wise. You'd be like you'd be wiser than anyone ever. You would be able to see everything from the present to the long term to you just know what to do. And you know that it was the best thing for you to do because it is wise. So you'd have no choice but to do it. Yeah, maybe you'd still get urges, but you'd realize, no. If I'm not going to sacrifice this little pleasure because I know deep pleasure is in the future. And that's wisdom. So if you had wisdom, you would sacrifice a little bit of pain for avoidance of a lot more pain. That's what people do when they give in to pleasure. They say, ooh, I can't endure this little pain. I'm going to give into it. They don't realize as giving into little pleasure to avoid a little pain, they avoid deep pleasure and give in to deep pain. And that's where people have a wisdom problem. And it's obviously hard to remind yourself this every single time pleasure comes knocking at the door. And that's why we still fall. And that's why we still give in to cheap pleasure. And sometimes we don't even know. Think about how ignorant you've been to things that now seem so obvious. I spent so much time playing video games and watching, TV and anime. And I don't regret all of it. I don't really regret anything because I believe everything happens for a reason. But I do, in a sense, regret it because if I was to orchestrate my life, I wouldn't do that. But I trust that, the higher power knows better than me. So I don't regret it, but I do at the same time. Like I say, philosophy is often paradoxical. But I was just ignorant. It feels so weird, but I feel like so often, like I didn't gain consciousness till like 18. That's obviously not true, and that sounds crazy to say. But if you knew me back then and you knew me now, I mean, I think you might have to agree I'm onto something because I've changed a lot, and the things I used to like, I detest, and the things I used to detest, I love. I hated reading. It's all I do now. I hated writing. I love it now. I hated working out. I love it. I hated eating healthy. I love it. I hated discipline. I love it. Like I'm a complete opposite person. And that was in ignorance. I had no idea what I was missing out on. And I'm sure there's things right now that I'll look back on in a couple years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and be like, I was ignorant. If I was doing this back then, oh, how nice that would have been. But, everything happens for a reason. And recently, um, you can tell I like to surf. And recently, I figured out, let's say, a lot about the type of board I need because I'm trying to learn right now, and I've been trying to learn for a while. But I figured out so much so recently and about the type of board I should have, where I should be on the board, the waves, so much about the whole of surfing. And I'm still definitely so ignorant to it. But it's information that it's not that complex and not that hard to obtain. But if I had it, like a year ago, I feel like I'd be so good at surfing right now. But I'm still a beginner because I was lacking this information and lacking the tools to make me better. So I was ignorant. Obviously I didn't want to be stuck in the beginner phase for this long, but I was ignorant. I was doing my best. I thought I was doing what was right. I thought I needed to just give more time to it, but I was ignorant. There was other things that I was missing. And I was ignorant. I had a wisdom problem. And that's all we have. That's all we have is just wisdom problems. That's why getting wisdom is so essential. And the greatest people, the wisest people, learn from history's wisest, learn from history's greatest. That's why I read, Marcus Aurelius, Socrates. I got this Diogenes book, Diogenes the Cynic. I also just got Cicero. And I don't even know what Cicero is. He's a philosopher, a lawyer, philosopher, statesman, defender of Rome. Yeah, first modern politician. Yeah, but he's a philosopher though. So, I got Nietzsche right here. Robert Greene. I get the Bible. The Bhagavad Gita. The Dhammapada, discourses by Epictetus. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Confucius, Seneca. Um, I got Epicureanism, The Art of Happiness. I haven't read it, but I have it, which doesn't do me any good. But I've been trying to learn from the history's greatest. I have Dostoevsky. I haven't read him either, but I got Dante, The Divine Comedy, 4,000 Weeks, Oliver Berkman, Pierre Hadot, The Present Alone is Our Happiness. Like, and this isn't even that this isn't even close to how many books I have because this is not my home. This is a temporary home. Um, but these are literally books that I just ordered recently and brought with me, and um, yeah, I'm trying to learn from the wisest who have ever lived. It's a waste for me not to. I have no true mentor other than these people. And why would I want any other mentor? I got Plato over there too. Musonius Rufus. Why would I want any other mentors than these men? These men who have lived, have died, have written stuff down, have lived exemplary, that's the right word, lives, and have shown moral excellence, have lived with virtue, have found happiness, have found tranquility, have found peace of mind. Why would I not want to learn from these people? Why would I not take their advice? Why would I not learn from them? Do I truly think I know more than them? No. No. But I can learn from them and become like them. And I have another video about this too. And it's like, how do you become someone you love? If you don't love yourself, that's a wisdom problem. Because you don't know how to. And how you become someone you love is to do the things that you love, that you admire in other people. I admire Marcus Aurelius and his virtue and how he acted. I admire Jesus Christ. That's why I wear a cross. And that's why I've read the Bible. Not all of it, but a good amount. That's why I read books about Socrates. Because Socrates saying that, I forget their names, but so and so can hurt me. So and so can kill me, but they can't hurt me. To me, that just something about that line just makes my soul sing. And I want to be someone who says something like that. And someone who truly believes that. Socrates didn't fear death. That's admirable to me. And I love him for that. And that's how I want to become somebody I love. Acting with temperance like Marcus Aurelius. Acting with love like Jesus. Friedrich Nietzsche. I think he gets a bad rap. But being my true self like Friedrich Nietzsche was. Wanting so little like Diogenes. Like these are the people, like the small things I admire in these people. Like I got a Vegeta shirt on right now. Like I said earlier, I watch a lot of anime. And that's one of the things I don't really regret as much as everything else, because I've gained a lot. I've had the hardest workout sessions just thinking about people like Vegeta and Goku and Naruto and Asta and so on and so forth, because it's virtue and it's fictional virtue, so it can just be so exaggerated and it's sweet. But that's how you become someone you love, and that's a wisdom problem, because everyone wants to be somebody they love. I don't think anyone would say they don't, but I guess not everyone knows how to get there. Not everyone knows how to truly love themselves. And you can hear this and you can agree with this and you cannot act on it. That just because you hear it doesn't mean you've gained wisdom, doesn't mean you've gained knowledge. That's why I try to be careful with just being a person who writes down maxims and quotes. The Stoics hated pen and ink philosophers. They wanted real people who went out in the real world and acted with real virtue and wisdom and applied it to their lives. Who cares if you have a book of maxims, which I have, if you don't act on them? If you don't know what they truly mean, if you don't formulate your own opinion about them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Without further ado, no. Therefore, you have a wisdom problem.